through that experience, I said, wow, like everyone's got, quote unquote wellness wrong. Wellness was equated with spa. Anything holistic was like way out there crazy. Although it's interesting how I think we've kind of come back there post-COVID. And to me, like the magic was in the nuance and the blend. Like true well-being, in my view, is this blend of mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and environmental well-being. And so like the big vision was like, this is the future. How do we build a bridge? Health and well-being is nuanced. It's these 5 pillars. They're interconnected, mind, body, green, one word, not 3. It's all connected. And the vision was, how do we like educate people and ultimately give them tools to live their best life.
Men are being lied to. You're told midlife is a time for crisis and struggle. In reality, it's a time to thrive. Welcome to the Midlife Male podcast, a show that stops focusing on the why and shows you how to start living life on your terms. Because your best days are still ahead. All right, everybody, I have waited a while to have this next guest on the show. Jason Wachob and I were introduced by a mutual friend, Troy Aikman, and we've had kind of a long-distance relationship for the past year. He's someone who's had a positive impact on how I live my life by sharing his perspective, insights, and access into what he's learned and continues to learn through his work on his own podcast, his books, and his company, Mind, Body, Green. He's relatable, credible, and aspirational as a man in midlife. And in our conversations, having read his books and seeing how he lives his life as best I can from the outside looking in, I wanted to open the conversation up as to how he makes decisions, the actions he's taken, the choices he's made throughout his life, career, marriage, and as a parent that have gotten him to where he is today, and dive a bit deeper into what well-being really looks like and what it takes to find the joy in it in middle age. Jason Wachob is the founder and co-CEO of Mind, Body, Green and the author of Wellth, spelled W-E-L-L-T-H, and we'll get into that in the show, and The Joy of Well-Being, along with his wife, Colleen. He's been featured in the New York Times, Entrepreneur, Fast Company, and Vogue. He has a BA in history from Columbia University, where he played varsity basketball for 4 years, accumulating various injuries along the way that propelled him to explore non-surgical options and solutions that ultimately led to him transitioning from Wall Street to wellness and forming Mind, Body, Green. Mind, Body, Green, altogether one word, now has over 15 million unique visitors per month and is a leading media platform for health and wellness. This year, they launched their line of supplements aimed at promoting sustainability and longevity, and most importantly, he's a devoted husband and father who enjoys getting his 10,000 steps in walking to get his daily black coffee. Jason Wachob, welcome to the Midlife Male podcast. Sisu saunas. I am in my Sisu sauna pretty much every day of the week. I have the 2-person Eddy barrel model. They make multiple sizes, whichever Sisu sauna you go with. Rest assured, you are getting a quality product, a quality build, and quality performance. Cardiovascular health, autoimmune chronic pain and fatigue conditions, mental health, exercise performance and metabolism, detoxification. Those are 5 of the reasons I am in my Sisu sauna. And they work because when I get out of my Sisu sauna, I simply feel better, happier, and healthier. And you can too. Just go to sisulifestyle.com, use promo code MidlifeMale, and you'll save on your own Sisu sauna. All right, let's talk about the plunge. I love my plunge. This is a high quality, great looking, high performance cold plunge. It uses powerful cooling, filtration, and sanitation to give you a perfectly chilled, clean water experience with no ice needed. And look, I don't know who's going to tell you that they love sitting in freezing cold water. I'm not going to tell you that. But what I can tell you is that I love how I feel when I get out of sitting in cold water. So much so that it has become a daily habit. The plunge is the best product that I have found out there for this experience. It is easy. You flip the lid. There is no ice needed. The chiller keeps the water set to exactly what temperature you want it at. I've had mine for years. and it is extremely low maintenance. If you are looking to maximize middle age, if you are looking to bring cold therapy into your life, and you should be, go get a plunge. Go to plunge.com, and when you're there, use promo code MidlifeMale and save. Here we are.
Here we are.
So I made a wish list back at the end of December, and I posted the wish list of things I wanted to do in 2024. And one of them was come down to Miami and sit down and talk to you and Colleen as well. And here we are in February.
Well, we made it happen.
We made it happen. You made it happen. Thank you so much.
I don't know about that, but
Jason Wachob, welcome to the Midlife Male podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm in midlife. Here we go.
Here we go. Thank you for having me. I love, we're sitting in your office, and this is one of the things that I also am always interested in. It's like, okay, I want to how do people do things? How do people run their companies? How does their office look? How does their home look? And here we're sitting in your office, which is small. I'll be it's you and Colleen, and it's this single little room.
Yep.
And this is where you are running one of the largest health wellness media companies in the world.
Yes.
Walk me through that to begin with. I know that's a big step immediately, but walk me through how you got here to this space and how does that happen? Meaning there was a move from New York. We'll get into your history to down here.
Sure.
But shorts, t-shirt, adjoining desks, a bunch of your great supplements on the counter, a lot of really good books. And then there's just tons and tons of moving pieces and content that is going on.
So a couple of things as it relates to this office space specifically. I would say as a brand, one of our core values is profitability. And I believe that profitability is essential if you're a mission-driven brand. I think if you're profitable, you can control your destiny. If you're not, you often have to make decisions that are at odds with the mission, and then you run into trouble. So we've been profitable for seven years, I think now straight. And so going back to the office space, if you're running a profitable business, one rule of thumb is, control your operating expenses. And so, there's a great line from Danny Meyer's book, Setting the Table, which I'll use, is every great restaurant starts with a great lease. And in terms of running a business, you never want to, in my view, you never want to spend too much on an office. So to back up how we got here to this beautiful small office in Miami, our new home, we did have an office, a 10,000 square foot office in Dumbo. We lived in Dumbo for 14 years. The 10,000 office was put to work. We had 40 or so employees in New York. Everyone came to the office every day. We utilized the space. We had a studio. It wasn't, and we had a good lease too. COVID happened. Colleen and I found ourselves going to the office every day. We also made the decision to hire for best talent regardless of location, and we went to a remote first culture. So then about a year in, the workforce started to split. Half of our employees weren't in New York and half of our employees were in New York, and those in New York didn't really want to go to the office. And so Colleen and I looked at each other, and we also had a daughter entering kindergarten the following year. And we struggled with some of the values of the private schools in New York City. Public wasn't an option where we lived. The public school was terrible. The suburbs, we grew up next to each other in Long Island. I didn't want to go back to Long Island. The suburbs weren't an option for us. And Colleen and I had a love affair with Miami. Literally, we fell in love here. We went on our third date here. We got engaged here. We went on our mini moon here. We would come to Miami 2 to 3 times every year for over a decade, even with our kids. So we always loved the city. And it became clear to us, we can actually make this move. And we found a school that we really loved, and both of our daughters got in. So that was it. And we made the move. And then we started looking for office space. We started to downsize. We had the good fortune of our lease was up in Brooklyn in Dumbo in May of 2020. It's a good time for a lease to be up, start renegotiating. And so we renegotiated the lease and kept on downsizing the space and encouraged employees to come back in. And eventually we got to a point where the 10,000 square feet went to 2,500 square feet, and a handful of employees went in. And Colleen and I we're also looking for a space here when we moved, but also being very financially minded, didn't want to take on a lease that was expensive, exorbitant. There's 2 of us, so we found a workspace here. We're in about 170 square feet, more than enough space for Colleen and I to work. And I can record the podcast here, and the price was right. And so that's how we ended up in the space. And it's a co-working space. It's called The Bureau. A lot of great people in here. A lot of our friends. You met one of them, John Belay. A lot of transplants here, some entrepreneurs, and it's like a great vibe. And we do miss the culture of the everyday collaboration. But once it was clear to Colleen and I that just wasn't coming back in the office environment, specifically when we started to hire outside of New York, it was important to us when we found a new space to be in an environment where they're not our coworkers per se, but they're like-minded people doing interesting things. And that's what we found here. So,
a lot of decisions, a lot of conversations, it sounds like, between you and Colleen as it pertains to quality of life.
Yes.
How you want to do business.
Yep.
How you guys want to live. How you guys want to parent. These are all the things that a lot of men, myself included, struggle with in midlife or at all stages of our life, but particularly, I think in midlife when you have all these things. You guys have been married for a while. You've been running a business a certain way. You have children. You've been living in a certain area. Walk me through the process of how you guys, how you see it, how you communicate, how you collaborate to kind of make these moves. I think, where a lot of guys get hung up is on that how. They get stuck. I know what I want to do, kind of know why I want to do it, but I don't really know how to do it. And I don't know anybody that's really done it or talking about it. So walk me through a little bit of that process if you can.
So in terms of the move, like one thing Colleen and I as a couple, we're always on the same page with like the bigger picture decisions in terms of, or values per se. Does that mean we like the same music? No. We have, but in terms of values, I think we're always very aligned. And this also dovetails into work. Anything that's related to work in the bigger picture, you could speak to Colleen and I independently without speaking, and we're always on the same page. So like we're always very much aligned. And I think for us, we both grew up playing sports. I grew up playing everything and then ultimately played basketball in college at Columbia. Colleen grew up playing everything and rode at Stanford for a year. And sports were transformative for us. And we also believe in the power of being outside. Kids should be outside and running and active. And I've always believed I learned more from playing basketball at a high level to some degree, more than I ever learned in the classroom. And so that was something we were always very much aligned on and didn't align with like raising a child in New York City. And so we just started to look around. And I think going back to like the how, we were unclear, but I believe we're both big believers that sometimes you don't need to understand the path, but you got to take the first step and see where it leads. And whether that's trusting in the universe or having faith in God or whatever you believe in, we actually took a hard look at Austin. And ultimately, when we got there, because we love the city, we still love the city, but when we started to look at Austin under the context of could we live here, we even had a real estate agent, like it just didn't fit. Miami fit very quickly. One of the things just started to line up. There was the school where we ended up at, looked amazing online. I shoot an email to the director of admissions, hey, we're moving. Can we schedule time to visit? I get a response within 2 minutes. I'm a huge fan of your podcast. We're like, this is starting to align. And so I think it's that a little bit of like understanding and aligning on your values and then putting feelers out there in the universe and seeing what happens next and be prepared or open to kind of go with the flow. Because I also like being able to plan, vacations 3 years out in my life, but it's also the balance of like one foot in front of the other, especially with a big decision. Take a step, see what happens.
You mentioned values.
Yes.
And it comes up in your book a lot as well. What are your values? Do you have a mantra? Do you have a core set of values that you live by? Have they changed? I think that's another thing that I hear from guys, they don't know who they are or what they stand for, or maybe they're conforming in life, or they've gotten to this place and they're just like, I'm not really quite sure how I got here. I'm not really sure what I stand for. I seem to be doing a lot of things I don't want to do with a lot of people I don't really want to do them with. And I'm not really sure how to stop doing that and kind of create some values and boundaries.
Yes. I don't know if it's one thing per se. I think a couple things come to mind. One, family, you say family first. I think that changes once you have children. Children really do become the center of your world, and you'll do anything for your kid. And so it's definitely, we operate from like kids, we're kids centric, kids first. I also think for us, we value meaningful connections with like-minded people. What does like-minded mean to us? I think it's people who are passionate about what they do, people who are interesting and interested in what you're doing, people who are good people and want to make the world a better place. That doesn't necessarily have to mean they're an entrepreneur in the health and wellness space. That could be someone in, real estate or whatever, but just like a good person who's looking to like do good in the world. And then I also think values in terms, something that resonates with us here. It's like there's almost we like simplicity in terms of values, whether it's family, good friends, good food, maybe money in some circles. Like we respect the simplicity that we've found to some degree in Miami, where people are pretty straightforward what they like. Whereas in New York, it was a little bit more difficult. I think the same holds true for LA, to like really get the core of like, what's someone's motivation here? Where in Miami, I think people, it's like they like family, they like to celebrate. A lot of people like plastic surgery, like fancy cars. Like that's not us per se, but like I get it and I respect that. And there's like people are more forthcoming. And I think ultimately what do we aspire to? It's this idea of, being able to, I think of our children and what we would say to people in general, like being able to find something that you love, being able to work hard to acquire the skill set to be good at that thing so you can ultimately make a living.
You started out at Columbia. Well, we're from college. I mean, we grew up. Yes. What we have discovered here is that we grew up a town away from each other.
Yes.
You grew up in Manhasset, Long Island. I grew up in Great Neck.
Yes.
We were joking a little bit about this earlier, that Great Neck was nowhere to go but down. For me, it was a Jewish community. It was tennis. It was BMWs. And you were described Manhasset as
lacrosse, the Catholic Church, and alcohol. Yeah. Just read the tender bar. It's to a T, the town.
Exactly. And I also find that interesting that literally they butt up right against each other. And your upbringing in Manhasset, considerably different from my upbringing, I think, in Great Neck.
Yes.
And you went on to Columbia.
Yes.
To play basketball. I went on to University of Michigan not to play basketball at 5'9". You at 6'7". I could go there and do that. But we also, unfortunately, have this in common, that you lost your father when you were 19.
Yes.
And I was 17 when I lost my father. How did that change your perspective or outlook on how you were living, or maybe even what you wanted to do next?
So it was a couple of things with my dad. So one, my parents divorced at a very early age. I was 3 years old. So like I never really knew what it was like to have both parents in the same household. So I was raised by my mother and grandmother. My father and I definitely had rough patches. We weren't the closest. And so one of the life lessons that occurred actually before he died, my father had done very well financially when I was younger. And then our relationship wasn't that great, but toward the end of his life, he was like in complete financial ruin. He was in commercial real estate around the time. It was like brutal. He spent too much and was in serious financial distress, like broke. And at that time, the relationship before he died was probably the best it had ever been. He was around more. He couldn't just disappear and do his own thing. And so even before he died, like I equate, like he was broke and our relationship was probably the best. So like, I think to me, the signal there was like, wealth does not equal strength of relationship. So that was like a big lesson. When he died, he had a heart condition he didn't take seriously, the structural defect, and ultimately died of a heart attack, about to play paddle tennis in Westchester, Saturday 8 a.m. and dropped dead. And I think even though he had a previous heart attack, he looked like the pillar of health. He did smoke cigars and didn't really take his heart issues seriously, but it was still a shock. And I think I left, so the death was very sudden. And I think, this idea that life is precious, someone could be here today and gone tomorrow, really hit home. We had gotten into a fight a couple of weeks earlier where I like hung up the phone on him, and then had made up with him a couple days before. And so one of the things I immediately thought of like, wow, how terrible would I feel if my last conversation with my father was, me 19 years old, pissed and hanging up the phone on him. It felt pretty awful. And so I think today, fast forward, no matter how angry or what the conversation is with anyone I love, I always leave every conversation with, I love you. So like we'll never, and I think so that has stayed with me, and this idea that life is precious. And also the other thing too, it doesn't matter how he looked fantastic, but he was a mess inside. And ultimately we all believe, even his friend, the stress of financial ruin and going through another divorce that was like painful, spent time in jail because he couldn't afford to pay the alimony and his ex-wife put him in jail, had the heart attack in jail. So like the stress, to this day, stress, like we all know this, but like in my view, like stress killed this person. So a lot to unpack there, but.
Yeah. Do you have siblings?
I have 2 half sisters from his second marriage.
Are you close to them? Or?
Not really, because we never really, my father actually like raised, like I'm older. And so I was just like doing my own thing. And when I spent time with him, I wanted to spend time with him solo. And so didn't really have much relationship. And then I'll see them here and there. But essentially we were raised as 2 independent families.
I was asking, I have 2 younger brothers.
Yes.
And I think it's changed the dynamic of our relationship has changed significantly over the years. And as you talk about, I didn't want that last conversation to be an argument or anything. Yeah. That value of, we never know when our ticket's gonna get punched. And then now you said a lot to unpack. Then there's the other side. You can look good, you can be in great shape, but it doesn't matter. And then there's this tertiary topic that you touched on, which is like, what does wealth really mean? And you change the spelling of it even, in your last book from WEALTH to WELL, and kind of this movement into, wellness and wealth. And again, what that really looks like. And yet you first went into finance. So you get out of Columbia and you go into finance.
Yes.
So was it chasing money? Was it the thing you were supposed to do when you graduate from Columbia? Was it you didn't have a better idea at the time?
All of the above. So when I graduated in 98, most people did 3 things. If you had good grades and aptitude for science, you went to med school. If you had good grades, maybe you went to law school or became a banker. If you didn't have good grades, that was me. I graduated with a 2.01, probably the lowest to ever graduate. I went to college with the goal of, I'm going to have a fantastic time and play basketball. I have some regrets around that, but at any rate, people in my group, athletes, they went to Wall Street. A lot of them became traders. So I ultimately became a trader. That's what people kind of did. And I also I didn't come from money. So I had debt. Like Columbia's was expected, like it's significant. I don't even know what it costs today, but I had debt coming out of school. And so for me, it was, how can I how can I take care of my debt? How can I become financially independent? Trading was appealing to me because it was almost like a continuation of becoming an athlete. Every day, it was you and your P&L. You were all sitting next to each other. It was very much felt like a fraternity, if you will. It was a great time. Like I really enjoyed it for a couple of years.
Mm. And you left.
Yes.
You left when you were doing well. You had some good years there. You left when you were doing well.
Yes.
And I'd like to go here because you were younger at the time. Were you married though when you left?
No, I left. I started to get one foot out the door after 9/11.
Okay. So you decided you were going to leave.
Yeah.
And I think this is another area where a lot of guys get hung up. At the time that you left, though, you weren't married. It was post 9/11.
Yep.
What do we hear so much of right now? Is quit your job and follow your passion, and life is too short and all this. And I get all of that stuff too. And you made your transition early, but you've made a few pivots, in entrepreneurship and into where you are now with mindbodygreen. You talking there was a cookie company.
Yeah.
There were a few iterations of you along the way. And I'm curious now, you're 50, right?
49.
49. Okay, sorry. 49.
When's this going to air?
49, 51. We'll
I'll
get
be 50 in November.
November, right. Okay. So I think there's this kind of like glamour in a way now, or this first that we're supposed to like, guys, you should quit your job again. You should follow your passion. Life is too short and all this. And I think the part that gets missed again is back into the responsibility aspect of it. It's one thing if you're young, if you're single, if you can move back in with your mother. It's another thing if you are married with children, or whether you've got private school
100%.
tuition, so on and so forth. What do you say, to those guys that are kind of on that wheel, right now? And maybe they want to, or they're being encouraged to do it, but it might be a very irresponsible thing to do. And not everyone's cut out for entrepreneurship either. I think everyone's 100%. Looking for this wellness that you talk about, this mind-body-green connection, this redefining of wealth. But they're like, how the fuck do I actually do that when I have all these other obligations, responsibilities that have somehow gotten here in my life?
Yes.
And all you're telling me, man, is to meditate, cold plunge, sit in a sauna, do yoga. It's like, that's not going to do it for me.
Yes. Look, I think it's complicated. Like I said, I don't have like a good one size fits all answer. I will say that no, even with being fortunate enough I do what I love. Like, this is my passion. There's still a hell of a lot that I don't like about my job. Colleen would say the same thing with the responsibility of 50 employees and like HR. Like, there's just a lot. And so for someone looking for more purpose or meaning in their life, I think a good exercise is kind of trying to edit accordingly and do the work to understand, like, what is it? What do I want more of? And how do I integrate those things into my current existence versus doing the 180 or hard left or, proverbial, like I quit my job and go to Bali and find myself. And sometimes, look, there is sometimes people need to do that. But I think like trying to have an understanding of what's realistic in terms of my life, in terms of my family and my family's needs and expenses and mortgage and all of that, and try to like chip away and build around it, I think is like a good process versus just quitting your job and walking away tomorrow. Not to say that can happen, but I think really getting to the core why. Like, what am I really searching for? What's really missing?
What did you want mindbodygreen to be when you started out?
I think a bridge between the Eastern and Western worlds. To quickly segue to the founding story, I almost had back surgery. I had 2 extruded discs in my lower back pressing on my sciatic nerve, the classic L4, L5, S1. Excruciating sciatica on my right leg. It felt like a lightning rod. Walking brings me so much joy. Like, I'm never going to be, I don't like extreme sports. I don't really like running. I can never do one of those things with you. But like, if you want to go on a hike or go for a power walk, I'm there. I'll walk for hours. And that was taken away. And I was really struggling. And I almost got back. I went to see a doctor, and like, I think it was the MRI, and he's like, you need back surgery. And I have nothing against back surgery, but the success rates are not good. And I view surgery as a last resort. So I sought a second opinion. That second opinion said the same thing. And then he also mentioned, maybe some yoga or therapy could help. And so I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Colleen and I were dating at the time, started to do some light yoga, 5 to 10 minutes in the morning, evening. I started to feel better. The sciatica started to go from the toes and started to go further north up into the butt. When it starts to move, like it's getting better. And over the course of 6 months, completely healed. At that time, I started to look at stress, sleep, nutrition. I was very stressed at the time. I was part of another startup, the cookie company. It wasn't doing well. I flew over 100,000 miles domestic. Me in a coach seat is a complete disaster. It's 6'7". It's like not good. My idea of nutrition back then was just steak and martinis at the Palm Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan. I consumed so much, you can see my caricature next to Joe Namath and Adam Sandler. See what I look like at 27, 28 it was when I first got up there. Changed my diet, still eat meat, but like started to look at inflammation, started to like toxins, and made a lot of lifestyle changes along with yoga that like led to my ultimate like complete healing over the course of 6 months. And through that experience, I said, wow, like everyone's got, quote unquote wellness wrong. If you fast forward to 2008, or rewind to 2008, 09, wellness was equated with spa. Anything holistic was like way out there crazy. Although it's interesting how I think we've kind of come back there post-COVID. And anything that, that world like only like preached the choir of like, the west side of LA, Boulder, Brooklyn, the demo. And to me, like the magic was in the nuance and the blend. Like true well-being, in my view, is this blend of mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, and environmental well-being. Also back then, I'd say mindbodygreen. People like, I don't get the green. No, everyone gets it. And so like the big vision was like, this is the future. How do we build a bridge? Health and well-being is nuanced. It's these 5 pillars. They're interconnected. Mindbodygreen, one word, not 3. It's all connected. And the vision was, how do we like educate people and ultimately give them tools to live their best life. And that started with content and events and then education and products eventually.
Along the way, from what you've set out to do, a lot of white space between, we're going to string these words together. We're going to and this is what I want to do. And I've gotten a taste of kind of what wellness feels like, looks like. There's something here, to a lot of white space between the vision, the idea, and obviously the execution. Yes. And we're at 15 million or so visitors.
Well, that's changed again too. That's another story. Media is rapidly changing.
Yeah. And we'll definitely get into that. What has, I guess, either exceeded your expectations along this path, and what maybe has missed the mark? Or like, hey, we're in media, but like, we've got to do it this way, or we've got to attract, and whether it's search engine optimization or whether it's click headlines, and that line between like, hey, what we envision and what we stand for, what we want to do, maybe what we sometimes like have to do, back to profitability and growing a business and scaling and all that. Because I'm at this intersection too. We were talking about it a little bit offline. It's like, we're building a media company. Are we trying to build a lifestyle brand? We stay narrow and deep.
Yeah.
Do we do these fucking listicles of top 5 things when it's like, I can't stand lists, but then I go to pages and all you see is lists everywhere. And what's happening is people just tag over 40 to like any other article, or they give you like the one thing and you go, it can't be one thing. It's what you're saying. It's all
so
do that.
I think a couple things. I do think the mission has not changed. I think the methods have changed. And so in terms of channels, like channel mix has definitely changed in our history, where Facebook was huge in us being able to grow from 100,000 to 15 million in 2.5 years in terms of unique visitors on a monthly basis. And then Facebook started to go away. And then we adjusted. And then search became bigger. Now we're kind of, a lot more focused on email and direct, and search is still big. And so like the channels have changed, and we've adapted in a way that has been good for the business. We still reach people. And so that could come across as like a certain type of headline or a best practice, but like we've evolved to the media channel landscape, which has gone through shifts. And a lot of media brands have not been successful at all doing that. I think BuzzFeed being the poster child, they're essentially out of business. They weren't profitable. In terms of like the content, our view has always been, I think, to be flexible and to evolve as the science evolves. Like we're at our core, we're a science-based holistic brand. And we like to say like we started as a media brand and now we're a lifestyle brand. We still believe media is a big part of it is a big part of what we do. I believe content is paramount in health and wellness. You got to educate people. Like if they're going to buy a product, well, why should I buy the product? Like just great products aren't like, you need to educate like the why. And so I'll use an example. Yoga was a huge part of my personal transformation. And in the early days, and you go back to New York City in the 2010s, it was very much the health and wellness scene. It was yoga and green juice. And that was like the vibe and the community. And I fast forward today, and our audience is mostly women too. Today, it's about longevity and resistance training and protein. And this is for women. And I think about, eating vegetables and leaning vegetarian or vegan versus today being omnivorous and making sure you're getting quality animal-based protein and getting resistance training. That's an evolution. And I think we've always been good at being flexible and aware, and where the science goes, we'll go. We will never we've never taken a position and doubled down on it. Where a lot of personal brands tend to do that, and I understand why. But like as being curators of the space and connected to many experts, we've been very good at like following the science or trends and being flexible. Same mission, still hold the mission, but we'll change our view. Whereas there are some people in our space, they'll double down.
I reserve the right to change my mind. It's like,
exactly.
Do you differentiate between, let's say, your and Colleen's personal brand and mindbodygreen? I mean, because you've raised capital now too. I mean, you have a business and you have a life. Here you're sitting in shorts and a t-shirt.
We're in Miami.
Right. We're in Miami right now, living the way again that you want to, but we also have a business again to run and people to answer to.
Yes. And we're not really, I guess we are personal brands, but we're really not. At our core, we're, co-founders and co-CEOs and parents, and we're running a business. I think in terms of our personal brand, we walk the talk and we'll do anything that is the best interest of the brand. If that involves one of us, we'll do it. If it doesn't, so be it. But our core interest is ultimately like the success of mindbodygreen. And sometimes we're the best people to do something and sometimes we're not.
Two things. One of them you just mentioned, we walk the talk on the brand. I want to get into that. And the second side of it was, I didn't want to overlook this, was you talked about, look, in any business, no matter how passionate you are about it, there are things that you don't like.
Yeah.
And I think that gets also missed by a lot of people. They see the glamour side, or they see the website and they see the events and they see the experiences, but they don't see, they look at the outcomes.
Sure.
Instead of looking at all the actions that lead to the outcomes. What are some of the things that you struggle with or that you maybe don't particularly like about the business side? Can we open up that conversation a little bit?
Sure. I think when you start to have the business gains more complexity and you start to add a lot of headcount, I think, managing large teams is, there's a lot of fun with that. And there's a lot of good with that, but there's also headache. I think any entrepreneur, any CEO, or anyone in C-level will say, managing can be great, but it also can be a headache. I think it's a lot easier when it's a handful of people. I think as you grow, there are certain stages it becomes more complex. And I think you end up, there's a lot more housekeeping, so to speak.
The walking of the walk side. What does that look like to you? What do your days look like? What do you do yourself now?
So for me personally, it's a couple of things. One, I've been somewhat blessed and I'm a decent sleeper. Sleep etiquette's very important to me. So I will always opt to go to bed earlier rather than later, have a sleep routine. I, will try to tend to eat dinner earlier if I can. I still enjoy alcohol occasionally, but like I've learned if I drink later in the night, that's going to be more problematic. I'm better off having a drink at lunch. So says my aura and my whoop. So like sleep, sleep is foundational. Like there's a great line, I think with Andrew, I think it was Andrew Huberman, like ask someone, if you want to know how someone's doing today, ask how they slept. You'll get an answer. So sleep etiquette. And then in the morning, I am very fortunate to live across the street from Anatomy, Miami's greatest gym. Argue tell Mark Magnus, the best gym in the world. A couple days a week, 3 or 4 days a week, I'll go across to the cold plunge if I'm not driving our kids to school. And then if I do drive our kids to school, I won't do that. I try to get to the gym 3 to 5 days a week. I'll switch it up. I don't go long though. I'm like a 20 minute guy. I don't rest a lot. I go hard and I get out. Like I could never do the hour plus. Like I just go.
Do you train alone? Do you have a trainer?
I train alone, and I've had some trainers there. And right now I'm like in my alone phase. So I'll go there 3 to 5 days a week. I am a walker. Like I love walking. It brings me such joy. So I'm like a 13,000 step a day guy. I try to take the stairs. We live in the 7th floor of a condo we're renting. I'll try to do the stairs 4 or 5 days a week to get my stairs in. So like, but if I don't get 10,000, like I'm a grumpy dinosaur, as my daughter would say. If I don't get 10,000 steps, like I just.
Do you bring your phone? Do you combine? Like I have a 2-for-1 thing. I like when I go walking a lot. I like the 2-for-1. I like to take my calls, or listen to something. Kate tells me to leave my phone, all this in there too.
It varies. Sometimes I'll want to catch up with someone. Other times I want to listen to a podcast, and other times I just don't want to do anything. I just want to walk. I'm also very conscious. I'm a nasal breather. So like breath is everything. So like I'll consciously try to breathe through my nose all the time. And then I eat pretty clean. I take our whey protein powder twice a day, every day. I love it. Our collagen, like on our supplement. So like I'm a big smoothie guy in the morning and lunch, partly because I don't like to think about what I'm going to do. And I actually really like smoothies, and I try to get creative. And then dinner we'll kind of end up eating at home, or our kids love True Food Kitchen, and it's like the one place we can go with them and they can get whatever they want. So I'm like, we'll make the trip and do that. And the weekends, I'm a lot more. I'll like go off the rails a little bit more, but like I would say I'm 80% pretty dialed in with diet.
Where do friends fit in? We talked about this, and you posted about this recently too. And, we talk about, events and experiences. I mean, even we chatted about it first from even a business standpoint about, look, events and experiences are becoming, very popular and very big. At the same time, men are really struggling, I think, with relationships and with loneliness.
Yes.
And then there are these experiences and events that have been created to kind of, I think, cater to that or try to fill that void. Mm-hmm. But they also, finding the right ones are very hard, there too, and understanding. And what you described, even in your day and in your life, I was wondering, okay, well, where do friends fit into this? Are you lonely? Are you a loner?
Well, one, I think, being in a committed relationship is huge, and having children. So like family to some degree is just like so important, and family is everything. And I think what I found with friends is that's become, when you're married and you have 2 little kids, like you're in it, you throw on a business on top of it. I don't have the free time. And I don't even know if it's like, even if I'd want it. So like what's changed for me. So a Friday night, our daughters love playing sports, and they play volleyball. They play club volleyball. It's like, I'm going to go watch that. Like I want to go. I don't want to necessarily go out with a friend. I'd rather I'm also very aware they're young. They want to hang around me. You know this, like it's probably going to change. Or it's just like drop me off. And so I try to like be an involved dad and try to go to everything as much as I can. Cause like, our 7-year-old is off the charts tall and already looks like she's 10 or 11. And I'm like, oh God, you're getting old, but she still wants a hug and wants me to pick her up. And she's 75 pounds. I'm happy I'm strong enough. I got the strength. I can still do it. That's my motivation for the gym. It's not like, I like looking good, but like, I want to be able to like pick up my, kids. And so friends is more difficult as you age. It's harder to keep in touch. Guys aren't as good as like, hey, let's just hop on a phone call. So like I lost touch with a lot of friends in high school and college. It becomes more episodic. Like maybe I'll see someone, like one of my good friends from high school came to a book launch party. He lives north in the Palm Beach area. So he came down for that. It was great to see him, but I hadn't seen him in years. College sporadically. Caught up with one of my best friends from college overnight over the phone, but it's more challenging. And it is a big problem with men. 1 in 7 men don't have a single friend. And as you know, men are not as likely to share that maybe they're struggling like other men. And I think as you get older and you have kids, you start to prioritize like what's really important to me. And you can't have, in my view, it's hard to be as active as you want with friends and be an active dad and run a business. And there are sacrifices. And for me, the sacrifice right now is friends, but I'm okay with that.
I think it's a great point. It also leads to quality over quantity.
Yes.
Which I think is a big area where men struggle. I think we get roped in a lot to this quantity. They are, as parents, now we have inherited, if you will, the other dads and families from our school, from exactly. the volleyball teams, from everywhere, from work, whatever it is. And you could be surrounded by a lot of people, quantity. There could be a lack of connection and quality there.
Yes.
And you feel like some of the loneliest times of my life, I've been around the most people.
100%.
Because they haven't been necessarily the right people, but they were just, always there. And I think what's become interesting is this notion of, as you describe, quality where, hey, you have a lot of what you were describing, it kind of reminds me of, a personal operating system. I talk a lot about guys developing their personal operating system, the thesis for how they do things. Like if your family really is first, that you need to show that.
Yes.
You need to operate that way. And then you need to back into what your other professional responsibilities are and how the money fits in and all this. And where do I have time for friends or relationships, and who makes the cut, quite frankly, in there. So like you were even describing, like we were talking about, hey, we should get a good group of guys together and we should go see the Dead at the Sphere, and like who would fit. I think there's this interesting time of our life.
Should we call out for a DM who's interested? still working on the group.
We're still working on the group. If you're interested in going to see Dead & Co. at the Sphere, I don't know when they actually start this.
We
don't know
so
either.
many dates.
Yes.
We'll offline about that after.
Yes. But it's one of the things that I've become focused on in trying to, build out my inner circle, friends and interesting guys. And I think the home field advantage is gone, where it doesn't have to be in your hometown anymore.
100%. And I think where it all collides. So in the past week, we've gone out 3 times. You'll be the third. We're going to go to Stadell's after. We're going to have a great time. Colleen and Kate are going to go. And so I think when worlds intersect, where it's, we've got shared values, we've got, similar business interests, and, whether there's kids or not, when like the world, it just becomes easier when there's like worlds kind of collide in a good way, versus someone who's a great friend, but, maybe values don't align. They're doing something different. They're still a good friend, and it's not a reason to, say sayonara. You still want to keep in touch, but it's often more difficult to make time.
Mm-hmm. The guys that I hear from, it's not about more. They don't struggle with more. It's not about saying yes. It's about what you're kind of heading in that path. It's that learning to say no, or learning to say no politely, or creating those boundaries. Again, it's not about saying we have to burn the bridge or we're no longer friends, but it is about, I think, protecting our space and our time.
Too often. I say no too often.
Okay, well, walk me through. Was that, hey, did it start as you said yes too often, and now we've over-indexed into no too often? And Are we trying to bring it back in line? I found I'm trying to get it back myself past 50.
Yeah.
Very different at 47.
So I think a lot of me started to say no to most of everything, like when I began the entrepreneurial journey, because like you're in the thick of it, and like this was a journey. So when I left Wall Street, one foot out the door after 9/11, then officially out the door in 2004, mindbodygreen was 5 years later. I didn't know mindbodygreen was kind of going to make it till 2013, and then we had some moments in 16 or 17 that were a little rough. So like, and then 20, we made it, we did fine. But like there were periods like I had to be very focused, like the business, like this is our livelihood, this is our business, we have employee, like we got to make it. So it kind of went to the wayside in that journey, even though we're still like being an entrepreneur, even though we're doing fine and we're growing. There are days when, you think, all right, this is gravy. And then certain days it's like, oh, wow, like, oh man, this could go wrong and that can go wrong. That's like hard to shut off. And so I think a lot of this happened like it's growing the business, and I'm trying to like get a little bit more balance there.
What do you want the business to become? Like when even going back to the concept of wealth that we were touching on earlier, like, is there enough? Is there an end point? Is there I live to work and I love what I do, or I work to live? And by the way, I would like to be out of this by.
So it's a good question. There will have to be an endpoint, or at least a quote unquote liquidity event, because we do have investors. And so most of our investors bought in because of the vision and the mission, but they also expect to return their money at some point. And so we do have to give them a return on their capital. And so to do that, you either have to take a significant investment where you can do some sort of a buyout, or you eventually sell the company. So one of those two things will happen at some point. Do I see myself or do Colleen and I see ourselves just selling the company and walking away? No. And I don't think anyone who would make a significant investment or buy the company would say, all right, it's ours now, see you later. Like we're big stewards of the brand. We would stay on to, make sure the brand doesn't lose its guiding principles. And I think most investors or companies are smart enough to realize if you have a sane founder who is operationally and financially savvy and not reckless, like getting rid of that founder is not a good thing. There are other histories we could point to, headlines where founders a little bit crazy and not stable, and getting rid of that founder is necessary. But in our case, probably not going to happen.
You guys recently went into the supplement business. And I'm looking at kind of thinking about the arc. And if I fumble this a little bit, forgive me here, but launching again as a media company, really transitioning into more of a lifestyle brand, evolving into a lifestyle brand, and now into like CPG, consumer products.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. What made you want to do this?
It was maybe turning, taking a life experience and turning it into a business line. So as you mentioned, my father died of heart disease in his 40s. And so in my early 40s, I wanted to get a little bit more sophisticated around testing, and, beyond like blood pressure. And so went through started to do some more extensive blood work with Dr. Frank Lipman, who's a dear friend of my doctor. And in the process, found out that my homocysteine was sky high. Everything else was fine, but homocysteine is a marker of inflammation in the blood. It means you're not methylating properly. And when you're not methylating properly, and I'll back up, if you have the MTHFR gene, which approximately 40% of the population has, there's a good chance you're not methylating properly. And if you're not methylating properly, it could lead to high homocysteine. If you have high homocysteine levels, inflammation in the blood could lead to a stroke, pulmonary embolism, which Colleen had after a long flight, blood clot, like a catastrophic blood clot, aneurysm, like things you don't want. Your homocysteine should be under 15. Mine was 63. And so I'll never forget, Frank called me. He was like, take the test again. It's a mistake. I took it again. It wasn't a mistake. But in the meantime, I am messengering you over supplements. And this was we were both in New York at the time, not like FedExing. I'm messengering you over. Like, you need to take these, because I didn't go to Dr. Google immediately. I'm like, what, is it, I eat pretty well. Like, is there surgery, And he was like, no, you don't methylate. You need to take a cocktail of B vitamins and some other minerals to like get this right. And so it wasn't a mistake, took the test again. My homocysteine went from 63 to 23 in about a month. And then eventually where I am now is like between 10 and 15, still slightly high, but if you look at risk, it's like a J curve.
Okay.
Like I could say I was like a walking like blood clot in retrospect. I'm blessed to be here. And so it was through that experience where I always believed in supplements, but I was now a real believer. Like, wow. Like I am drinking this Kool-Aid, and I became the guy who does, 30 vials of blood twice a year and all the testing, and really started to like look at the category and said, okay, I've got this problem. What are other like problems that people have, and how can we create products? And my personal thesis, you hear better for you a lot in the category, but I'm a best for you guy. Like if I'm going to do it, I want the best. And so that was our thesis for the product line, and led us like in a couple year path to launching our own products where we, in our view, create like best for you. A lot of them are blends. I think a lot of people don't want to take like 40 capsules. And if you want, I'll use sleep, like we're going to create a blend versus many people recommend you take these 4 supplements and you do elimination tests, and that it's like, just give me like, this is probably going to work for you. And so that became like our thesis, like create best for you blends that are going to work for people that Colleen and I would personally take, and we take all of our products. So it came out of like, hey, this happened to me. Maybe there's an opportunity. And yes, there is an opportunity, and it's our fastest growing business line and a big market. And it's one I'm excited to be in.
I want to go back. I've had Frank on the podcast too.
Yeah.
And I think he's great. You chose to work with Frank.
Yes.
I mean, that was your first step.
Yes.
In a way. Why? I guess the why and the how, I think this is another area where again, like, I'm supposed to get my blood work done. I believe I'm supposed to supplement. There's stories about, methylation. There's stories. I just had ultrasound last week thinking about a blood clot. I had one 30 years ago. I can't figure out what's going on with my arm. Had one the other day. We have all these things that start going on, and there's so much noise out there of who to listen to or who to trust. And now everything can be done online. All this stuff can be sent to you. Everybody seems to be a doctor also, and you find out the guy who's looking at your blood is
an influencer.
Right. He's a chiropractor. Yeah. He's not a doctor, or all these other things that are going on. And I'm not judging but how do you, again, you talk about curation. You chose to go to Frank for that. How, if I'm sitting here going like, I don't know where to start. I don't know who to trust. I don't know who to call. What do I do?
So the why for Frank for me is, when I got to know him and his wife, Colleen and I got to know him and his wife and his family personally, and we really liked him. And as a practitioner, I respect, he actually sees patients. A lot of influencers who are MDs, a lot of them don't see a lot of patients, and their business is really their personal brand and book deals. And Frank does have a personal brand, and he writes books and like does TV, but like he still very much sees patients. And I appreciated that. I also appreciated that he was in his 60s. Like I believe in wisdom and age for a practitioner. Like they've seen a lot. I also loved his approach in that he was very forward thinking in terms of like, here are all the labs and tests we're going to do. But he also has that like beautiful, maybe it's like his South African heritage or his TCM background, where he will say to you, you need to just like chill out. And will say you're doing too much testing, which he has said to me in the past. Like I do blood work twice a year. There's a time where I'm doing it 4 times a year. And he was like, dude, you got to chill out. Like, and sometimes you need to hear that from a doctor. And I think in our space, we've come so far and the testing is so advanced and it's amazing. I'm going to do my Prenuvo next week. And I encourage people, like, do your Prenuvo if you have the resources. If you can you're concerned about heart disease, do your Clearly exam, which is second to none. Get your ApoB, like do all the testing. But also, there is, the things we can't measure. Well, I guess we can measure to some degree, but like stress, our emotional health, our connection to spirit, which I think is like the bigger picture. And anytime I felt something is off with my health, I've been stressed or like spiritually something's been off. And I think you can never discount. There's the art and the science. And I think sometimes with science, we like to go to things that we can measure. And I love, you manage what you measure. Like I'm wearing a whoop and an Oura ring. I love it. But then there's the art, the mystery, the spirituality piece to it. And I think Frank is that good blend for me.
I think there's a big difference between influencer and authentically influential.
Yeah.
And I think especially at our age, we're looking for other guys who are authentically influential, not the all show and no go, not the, again, the aesthetics are nice and cool. Okay. But that's not what really moves the needle, the knowing exactly who is trustworthy, who is relatable, who is credible. And I think also who is aspirational.
Yeah.
We touched on your friend who's down the hall that we just met here, who's in his 30s, and here we are, you're 49, 50s, and then you talk about going to Frank because he's in his 60s, and this wisdom, this notion of, I want to know where the puck is going, as my partner says, not where it is, and who are we looking to for that, which I think is also, hey, what is that guy doing? Who is that guy seeing? What is that guy taking or putting on his body, putting in his body to seemingly achieve the outcome or the one that we can see? There's always something we're not seeing out there. And I think that's really important to note and to consider. But let me look around at who I think is actually doing pretty well. Let me see what I can glean from that. Maybe I'm not going to use it all.
Yep.
But a little piece of this, a little piece of that, and that helps us build, again, how we operate and how we want to do things. And I'll ask you, since you mentioned it too, what do you do to manage stress? Because you said at the times of your life when you were maybe feeling, maybe not at your best, it was typically stress related. Like that immediately resonates with me. And I go, yup, I think that's true for me. And again, I don't care how much you can meditate and sit in the cold. Like if you can't sleep because you're so stressed out, what's not going on? What am I missing?
Yeah. I think about it's stress a couple different ways. There are like not that stress is real or not real, but the more difficult stressors of like real trauma where there's real loss or you're worried about a kid or there's financial hardship. And those things are a lot more difficult to manage. And then I think there's, the external stress, like a little bit of the noise, whether it's like conflict at work or conflict with someone else or just like the stressors of being late, like your everyday stressors. I'm being late or there's a line or, I think for me, trying to bring in perspective into anything I'm stressing about is helpful. I think breath work is powerful. I love breath work because it's a real-time tool. You start to like run a little hot, so to speak. I'll do a quick check on my Whoop to say, where's that heart rate going? Maybe I need to take it down a notch if I'm angry. Do a little bit of nasal breathing.
Do you use an app for that? Do you like box breathing or
No, I'll just take it down. I'll just start to be really mindful of my inhale and exhale. The classic inhale for 2, exhale for 4.
Okay, so like a box breathing situation.
Yeah, just the longer exhale. That's it. And just try to like bring it down a notch. I am Christian. So like I did grow up going to church. At one point I even taught Sunday school. So like I try to pray or just have a relationship with God. That's important to me. So like prayer and like that comes into play when I'm stressed. And I try to meditate when I can. I used to be a 20-minute twice a day guy, the classic TM, and that evolved with kids to maybe it's a couple minutes here and there. So it's like all of the above, going for a walk. And I think also just trying to be okay with it. This is upset. Like I'm stressed about my kid. And those are the hardest ones, I think, as a parent. Like when it's your child and maybe it's health related, Those I think are always more difficult for any parent, and there's kind of no way around it. You can only go through it.
You do therapy?
No.
Ever?
When I was like a little kid, like in my first, second, third grade, when I was like struggling being like the only kid with like divorced parents. And then that changed.
Here, thought about going back. It's prevalent now. I mean, I never did it for forever, and then started not too long ago. How long? I don't know. Kate's here. And I don't know. I don't know if I like it.
Yeah, I'd be open to it, but right now I'm not. There's like not anything I'm trying to work through, so to speak.
So I get that. I feel like it was one of those, I'm going to try this because I'm now 50 years old, and I think I have unpacked baggage, or maybe it's a thing to do if I want to reduce stress and I want to talk things out, and who do I want to share things with? And then I don't know. I think it's one of those things that's become maybe a little trendy or a little influential, or again, as I knew I didn't want to be in a group as a 50-year-old guy, doing that thing. So maybe I'll do this on a one-on-one basis and not have to burden my friends every time they call me, so that I'm the guy that they're like, oh shit, he's going to dump on me right now. Yep. But that it also can stir up a lot of stuff if you're not really trying to resolve anything, or it can stir up a lot of stuff and then take up a lot of space. Yeah.
And like, I'm a big believer in therapy, but I think currently there's nothing, like I'm pretty good. Like there's nothing I'm struggling with or like working through, so to speak. I think it's great.
And I've been asking the question a lot because I'm just not sure where I sit with it. And I'm curious about, do it, love it. Been doing it my whole life, not doing it at all. Don't have anything to unpack. Again, I don't think there's one right answer.
I think everyone's got stuff to unpack. But I think it's all about like how it impacts you in your day to day.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
In there.
So everyone has trauma. There are varying degrees, whether it's big T or little t. Everyone has, things they're unpacking from their childhood, and everyone's got something.
That is absolutely true. We all have something, and we have something to do. Speaking of that, we have something to do also. Yes. We have to eat, and then we have to move on to Gary after this too.
Yeah.
For the Rise podcast this afternoon. And we're going to get our wives together, and we're going to have a little lunch.
Yes.
And we've covered a lot of ground on this. And we've probably recorded the lunch too and talk about this stuff.
Lunch, we're going to go to Stadell's. Maybe we'll have a donut. Donuts are amazing, But it's going to be a fun day.
Yes. Well, listen, I really enjoyed this, Jason, a lot. Clearly, this was on my wish list. You're one of the guys. I enjoyed the fact that we got connected. We got introduced through some great people. We've been able to put this on the calendar and talk a bunch. I had the chance to meet Colleen in Austin as well. So all these things that have come together. And I love this opportunity where we get to sit down and learn a little bit more about one another. I think what you're doing is terrific. And I think it's super, super helpful to a lot of the guys that are out there that are watching you and looking for men that are out there living and leading by example. So thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're very kind. Thanks so much for having me. And the feeling is mutual. Big fan of the Midlife Male.
Thank you. We are there. All right. Jason Wachob, Midlife Male podcast. Guys, if you like what you have heard on the program, please give us a good review. Share the show with your friends, and tune in next week as well. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for listening. If you can leave us a review on Spotify or Apple, that would mean so much to us and really help us out. Also, be sure to subscribe and check us out on YouTube at Midlife Male. We'll see you next time.